Hello everyone. It may not feel like it right now, but the 2023 gardening season is quickly approaching and I am in the thick of planning for my Ohio garden right now. I'm planning not only the what to plant, but the things I want to change as well. Things that need upgraded or updated, which got me to thinking about things that I would change if I were doing it all over again. So in today's video, I'm going to share the top 6 things that I would do differently if I were starting my garden all over again this year. Starting with the smallest, working my way up to the biggest change of all. Number 6 would be to start small. And this is a reminder that I need for myself every single year, as I have a huge tendency to bite off more than I can chew. And this is starting off small, both in terms of the physical space that I have to manage, as well as the number and variety of plants that I'm working with. I made this mistake in a big way in my current garden. When I first started this garden, I was still working outside of the home full-time plus, and made the garden much larger than what I could actually manage given the time that I had. By about 3 years in, it was just a sad, weed-choked mess, and I had to admit defeat. I basically ended up just tilling everything under and starting over. Had I just started with a more manageable size and slowly built out each year, I could have gathered a much better feel for what I could reasonably manage given the time that I had and not set myself up for such a big failure. And number 5 is somewhat related to starting small, and that is not to put so much pressure on myself to grow all the things, cook all the things, preserve all the things, and to otherwise be completely self-sufficient right off the bat. It's okay to not have an Instagram-worthy pantry or to not have enough food put away every year to feed your entire family. Now, those are skills that I definitely want to work toward, but I used to feel like if I didn't achieve it, I was a failure. For years, the only thing I ever really got done was canning a few batches of tomato sauce and some applesauce. But very slowly and surely, I'd add to my achievements each year. One year, it was learning how to pressure can corn and beans. The next, it was preserving homemade elderberry syrup and strawberry jam. And the following, it was raising, butchering, and freezing our backyard meat chickens. There are years when I get a lot of what I wanted to get done. It's never everything, but sometimes it's fairly close. There are other years when I suffer major setbacks. This year was one of them. A kitchen remodel in the middle of canning season did not help, but it seems like there's always something. Life happens. There's work, there's kids, there's school, there's weather-driven events in the garden. And that's why I'm thankful for the sponsor of today's video, Green Chef. Green Chef is a CCOF organic certified company. It's a meal kit delivery service that provides options for every lifestyle: keto plus paleo, vegan, vegetarian, fast and fit, Mediterranean, and gluten-free. Green Chef saves me time by taking care of the meal planning, the grocery shopping, and most of the prep work. There are times during the year when, even with a bounty of food growing in my garden, I struggle to get meals on the table. And rather than just give up and order pizza once again, I can select several healthy meal options to have Green Chef deliver, have those waiting in my fridge, and whip them together in 30 minutes or less. Now, the box I received this week is the keto plus paleo option, and the first meal I made out of this box is the Italian shrimp garden bowls. With Green Chef, I get farm-fresh organic produce and premium proteins, like the wild-caught shrimp in tonight's dinner, so I can feel good about what I'm eating and how it got to my table, even if it's not coming from my own garden. But the most important thing, right? How does it taste? Now, I'll admit, after years of being spoiled with my own homegrown produce, eggs, and chickens, I'm a bit of a foodie snob, but Green Chef meals are delicious. Creative ingredient combinations, excellent seasonings and sauces. Green Chef says that their meals are restaurant quality, but these meals actually taste a lot better than most of the nice restaurants that I've visited lately. I'd say that home cooked quality is a better compliment and more accurate. Now, if you, like me, struggle sometimes with getting meals on the table and want to give Green Chef a try for yourself, use my code Growfully60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. Go to greenchef.com for more details. And the next thing that I would change would be number 4, focusing on planting all of my perennial crops first. When I started my garden, my major focus was on all the annual vegetables and annual flowers and herbs. Now, in a perfect world, I would have had time for everything. I didn't, and in hindsight, I wish that I would have focused my efforts on planting things like fruit trees, nut trees, fruiting bushes, perennial vegetables like asparagus, rhubarb, and sunchokes, and perennial and medicinal herbs. There's that saying, I think it goes, the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is now. It's very, very true. If I had focused on planting fruit trees when I first got to this property, I'd have a mature, fully bearing orchard at this point. I should have really looked at those perennial plantings like the backbone of my garden, planting those things first and then building the entire structure of my vegetable gardens around them. And number 3, another big change I would have made would have been to put up fencing or other needed protection against animals prior to planting. Deer, rabbit, groundhogs, these are some of the biggest offenders here in Ohio. Deer and rabbit will take down an entire plot of tender lettuce overnight, and groundhog are notorious for finding the largest, ripest, juiciest tomato, taking one bite out of the bottom and then moving on down the line. Now, while there are plenty of other animal critters and insect pests that I have to deal with here in Ohio, putting up a fence to keep those 3 primary offenders out is a fairly easy solution. Now, I didn't put up the fence here till about year 5, and that was only after I started to have issue with deer nibbling on my garden. So we put up a 5-foot wire welded fence around the garden, and while the general advice with deer is that you actually want to use at minimum an 8-foot fence, sometimes up to a 12-foot fence, I have found that the 5-foot fence keeps them out. I've been told this is because if deer can't see a clear spot to land, they won't jump a fence, and because my garden is so packed with things most of the time, I'm guessing that they don't want to take a chance of jumping in. Whatever the case is, that 5-foot fence has done the trick for me. I'm not going to guarantee that it'll work for everyone. So we put that fence up. It worked really, really well to keep the deer out, but I was still having plenty of trouble with rabbit. So to remedy that issue, I went along the base of the fence with a 2-foot chicken wire fence with holes small enough that the rabbits can't get through. Now, every once in a while, someone will leave the gate open. Now the biggest trouble I have is with little baby bunnies getting into the garden, but usually I can set a live trap or I can just kind of shoo them out of the garden. Putting up this fence has cut down on the damages from animals eating my crops by 99.9%. Now, over at my parents', where I still don't have fencing up, it is a constant battle. Over there, I currently use small temporary fencing, insect tunnels, and netting. My dad, the king of repurposing, likes to use all kinds of old pieces of junk to create military-looking barricades against the rabbits, and they usually find a way in anyway. But it's all reactive. We're usually getting the damage and then trying to play defense. Although it can be relatively time-consuming and it is an upfront expense, it's much, much easier to just put up a good, secure fence before the critters become a problem. And if digging critters are an issue for you, consider burying some of that fencing below the ground. Another protective strategy I should have employed right off the bat was lining my raised beds with hardware cloth when we built them to deter tunnelers like moles and voles. And number 2, related to the fencing, when I was planning my garden layout, so the overall size, the actual configuration, how wide my paths were, how my beds were laid out, I wish I would have paid more attention to my ability to get around inside of the garden with any implements. So my big issue now is with a wheelbarrow. It's so tight in here that sometimes I have a hard time maneuvering the wheelbarrow through my garden. And I don't have any access points wider than this doorway to get things through. So if I want to bring a load of wood chip mulch back here to the garden, I'm stuck doing it all by hand with that wheelbarrow. In hindsight, I wish I would have thought about those things. I wish I would have made my paths a little larger. I wish I would have provided a few more larger access points in this fencing just to have that ease of maneuverability. Now, understandably, if you're someone who's really tight on space, this isn't going to be much of a consideration. Sometimes you really have to squeeze things in. But if you've got a little wiggle room in terms of space, I wish I would have come out and actually spray painted the layout out here on my grass before digging up all of this garden space, just to see in a real world view how this would all work. And number one, the biggest change that I would have made in my own garden, and that is to first and foremost focus on soil health. If you have been around my channel for any amount of time, you have probably heard me harp on soil health, but seriously, I cannot overemphasize this enough. Healthy, vibrant soil that's full of life can make gardening an absolute joy, but sadly, the opposite is true. Neglected, subpar, dead soil can turn gardening into a drudgery. Soil health wasn't something that I seriously started thinking about until I was decades into my gardening journey. Soil health can be tricky. For many people, it's just not a natural inclination to think about what is going on under the surface level. It's hidden from view, and many of the goings-on are on a microscopic level. But healthy soil is a living entity. Every gram of soil is home to billions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, nematodes, insects, and earthworms that contribute to the overall balance. While this is a topic that could easily be its own video, for more, check out my video on how I improved my own clay soil. A few basic tips for healthy soil include: test your soil. I recommend testing soil at least once before starting a garden to get a snapshot of important measures such as soil pH, organic matter percentage, cation exchange capacity, and base saturation. It's a way to measure the soil's capacity to retain nutrients, macro and micronutrients, and trace elements. Or at the very least, try something like this home soil health assessment published by the Permaculture News. Some of the at-home tests and methods of evaluating soil can not only help you become more familiar with your soil, but it can alert you to potential issues. I've linked that home soil health assessment in the video description below as well. Aim for proper levels of organic matter. This level will vary depending on the type of soil you're starting with. 2% organic matter is considered good on sandy soil, but with soil heavy in silt and clay, 6 to 7% is closer to ideal. Keep in mind that with organic matter, more isn't necessarily better. Too much organic matter can cause nutrient toxicities. Aim for ideal soil structure and tilth. A soil with good tilth is porous. That will allow the water to enter rather than just running immediately off the surface, but it also allows water to move through the soil instead of becoming waterlogged. Keep topsoil covered, whether that's with cash crops, cover crops, or natural mulches. This is going to help protect microorganisms, it prevents runoff and erosion, and conserves soil moisture. Diversify and rotate your plantings. This can help prevent nutrient depletion and avoid soil-borne pathogens. And finally, encourage soil life by avoiding chemicals which can kill beneficial soil microbes and insects. Provide appropriate nutrition for microorganisms, back to that organic matter, which is an important food source for many, and limit soil disturbance as much as possible. By caring for the health of your soil, you'll be rewarded many times over with robust, healthy plants and delicious garden produce. So that is the top 6 things I would change if I was starting my garden all over again this year. And for you seasoned gardeners, be sure to drop a line in the comments below and let me know, what would you have done differently in your own gardens? And if you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.